Thank you so much for staying with us. This is Business Nigeria. The immediate past Chief Financial Officer of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Mr. Ajia Issa, says Africa is not looking for aid but investment capital to drive sustainable infrastructure and urban development. Speaking at the Future of Finance and Trade in Africa 2.0 meeting in Washington, D.C., on the sidelines of the IMF World Bank spring meetings, Mr. Ajia emphasized that Africa is reaching natural resources, but its challenges remain access to capital needed to power urban growth. He noted that Nigeria, under the leadership of President Bola Tinubu, has remained committed to innovative strategies to promote sustainable urbanization and infrastructure development, such as compressed natural gas, which also reduces carbon emissions, but also provides cheap energy alternatives for households and industries. Beyond energy, he added that Nigeria is actively strengthening financial structures to attract investments and the close of infrastructural gap. However, Mr. G has stressed that more international capital is needed to accelerate development across the continent and calls for more global investors to address all of these challenges. Joining me is an economist and research professor from the United States of America, Dr. Andrew Nevin. Dr. Nevin, thanks so much for your patience. It's good to see you. How are you today?
Hello, I'm doing the best I can. No, I'm really great to be with you. I love seeing you, brother. Love listening to your show. So we're doing okay this Friday in Dallas.
Yeah, great stuff. How is it looking like the World Bank spring meetings, IMF spring meetings, I beg your pardon? A lot of conversations at that meeting, and there seems to be that big theme, Trump's tariff. That is what is taking the toll of every conversation around that meeting. Tell us what you're hearing and what you think around this.
Well, let me start out by applauding, I think, Nigeria's participation. I think the finance minister and the CBN governor did a great job in Washington, and I think there's a real growing respect for the Nigeria's financial and economic management. So kudos to the country, and kudos to those two leaders and their entire teams. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the tariff situation is on the table. It's creating a lot of uncertainty. I mean, I'm not sure there's much more to say. We all follow the twists and turns. Those of us who are interested in business. I mean, there's been a pause in the tariffs. There's 10% tariffs. I mean, one of the consequences of this, of course, is, I mean, the one of the stated reasons for President Trump's strategy was so that people would put manufacturing in the United States. But of course, anyone that has investment, who has the responsibility for investment in factories, which have to last 20, 30, 40 years, is reluctant to invest right now because they're just not sure what the regime is going on. So there's so much uncertainty. And of course, that flows through to the forecast. The IMF reduced global growth forecast for 2025. And even for Nigeria, I think it's dropping from 3.4 in 2024 to forecast of 3.0 in 2025. So yeah, real problem for the world economy for everyone.
Now, let's now go to some of the issues raised around what Africa needs. I got the former CFO of NNPC saying Africa doesn't really need all of these handouts and all of that. They need real support, not just aid now. So what do you think the continent needs this time for us to be able to come up, considering the effect or the expected impact of Trump's tariff?
Well, I think the ex-CFO from NNPC is exactly right. I mean, the aid is inconsequential. I mean, I used to stand up in Nigeria and give the numbers on there. I think a few $1 billion aid flow to Nigeria, very small in the context of the overall economy. I mean, there were some interesting and important projects being done, but not really moving the needle. So we need investment. I used to stand up. I think I said $100 billion a year just for Nigeria. And people weren't kind of prepared to invest that. We continue to have that issue. But I mean, the world is changing so rapidly in a demographic sense. I mean, I think people all understand now that the number of children outside of Africa is dropping really rapidly, the number of people entering the workforce. So Africa is the workforce for the future. So one way or another, people are, if they want the world economy and world society to continue, we're going to need African brains and African young people to power it. So this has to be investment. But also the type of investment needs to change from the past. I mean, a lot of the investment comes in creating virtual work. I mean, I've talked a lot about working remotely from Africa to serve the global economy. That continues to grow rapidly. Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, Nigeria are all leaders in that on that. But of course, we also need some infrastructure, some energy production, some real estate investment as well. And people need to invest in Africa. And because the other economies are starting to really slow down, and some of them may start to shrink in absolute terms, the only place to invest is going to be Africa. So people will start to come.
Now let's look at the review of forecast. We saw IMF reviewing, even for the global economy, there is a reduction in figures. That's talking about projections from the IMF. Why do you think this is happening?
Well, because of the tariffs and the threat of tariffs, everyone is stopping, as I said, making decisions about investment. I mean, we're already seeing a slowdown in the existing rate of tariffs, even though there's been a pause in the 145% tariff by the United States on Chinese goods. There's still been tariffs put on, and there's been a slowdown in the goods. And a number of the CEOs of consumer good and retailers met with the president. It was reported, basically said in a few weeks we'll stop. With 145%, you can't import products from China, so the shelves will start to become empty on that, and that is one of the reasons for the pause. So not a big surprise. High degree of uncertainty. No one knows what the tariff regime actually is going to be in 1 month or 3 months or a year. So they're not making investments. They're pausing their production, not sure if it's able to go to the destination in economic terms. So we're going to see a slowdown. That's inevitable until there's a lot more clarity around the tariff structure and the investment structure globally.
Also, I see our federal government is seeking debt reduction, inclusive growth at the IMF World Bank Summit. Are you seeing that happening? Because many believe that the issue of debt in Nigeria, considering our budgeting, our expenses, and the naira devaluation issue, that Nigeria might not get that. I don't know how that really comes to you. What do you think regards to the level of our debt? Many say it's getting worrisome.
I mean, when I was in country before I retired from PwC Nigeria, I mean, I used to say I wasn't so worried about the debt because if we started to grow faster, it would solve that problem. I think it is getting to worrisome levels now. I think the idea of a general debt relief package for Africa is probably out of reach right now. I mean, I don't expect it to be done under the President Trump's administration. So I think that we're going to have to live with what we have. And it is worrisome. I mean, we need to be able to grow a bit faster. So when we say 3.0, I mean, people know who've listened to me over the years, 3.0% growth is really a very poor showing for Nigeria if that's what actually happens in 2025. I mean, we have population growth, various estimates, but let's say 2.5%. So if it's 3.0, then it means that barely moving in real GDP per capita terms. And of course, as debt continues to increase, we haven't really grown the economy very much to support that. So it is becoming worrisome. As I said, 10 years ago, I used to say I wasn't worried about the debt level. I was worried about the growth. And I said that every year, every year, every year. I expected growth to eventually take off 6, 8, even 10% in Nigeria, and it hasn't quite happened. So yes, we should be concerned about the debt, but as I said, I don't see in the present political climate in the world any generalized relief for Africa. So it's going to be a problem and I think Nigeria is better off than almost every other country. Other countries are going to have a lot more challenges from this debt overhang.
That's a very good one, but many are still optimistic about Nigeria's economy, considering the reforms and the fallout of that reforms. Dr. Nevin, you've studied this economy. You've had a lot of analysis around Nigeria's economy. Considering these reforms, what is your outlook for Nigeria?
Well, I continue to be an optimist on it. I mean, I wrote the book about the self-organizing nation in Nigeria, along with Rufai Oseni and others. And I mean, you see when you dig down, not the headline numbers. When you dig down, you see so much activity. I mean, we continue to have this major boom in outsourcing, so Nigerian young people serving the global economy remotely. That's a policy that His Excellency the Vice President has really pursued, and we wrote about years ago, and we're really happy to see that going, and I think that's very good. I think there's a lot of things going on in Lagos. I cite the Lagos Lagoon Highway project as something that I think is truly transformative. Of course, the Dangote refinery came on stream finally. So I mean, there's a lot to be optimistic about. It's just taking a lot longer than we all would have wished. And I continue to believe in Nigerians, and particularly global Nigeria. The diaspora is amazing. I mean a lot of diaspora Nigerians in Dallas, Texas here, and they're all doing very well, and they all want to contribute back to Nigeria. So this global community of Nigerians continues to get stronger and stronger. So I am continue to be optimistic in the medium term. And as I opened the show and saying, I think His Excellency the Finance Minister, His Excellency the central bank governor, I mean, their progress in what they're trying to do is really recognized in Washington. So that gives us a real cause for optimism. And I think that, even if the global economy slows down, Nigeria can do better than the 3% next year.
That would be a good one. But let's look at also improved performances in the non-oil space, such as services, financial services, telecommunications, information and technology. How would you assess Nigeria's performance in all of these sectors?
Well, I think the in the financial sector, I mean, the banks have always been one of if not perhaps the best organized, the best led sector in there. There's a lot, and of course, one of the things that people really need to applaud Nigeria for is the big banks in Nigeria are basically Nigerian banks, not foreign banks, which is not true in most African countries on that. So that's a real success story. I think that the investment banking business needs to grow. It's sort of the private equity capital, the pools of capital. I mean, we opened the show talking about investment into Nigeria. I mean, to be able to facilitate that investment, you need a strong investment banking sector. So, I mean, that needs to grow a lot more. Insurance is also a source of capital that needs to grow a lot more. So the banking sector is doing well. The other parts of the financial system need to grow. In terms of the IT infrastructure, I mean, to support the strategy I just talked about, that's at the core of what His Excellency the Vice President is doing, you need to have a very strong IT infrastructure. You need young people throughout the country to participate in the global economy and to do remote work. They need a strong IT infrastructure on that. So we need to continue to invest in those sectors on that. The other sector I'll highlight that I think is really critical and was actually talked about in Washington, of course, is liquid natural gas. That continues to be, let's call it a transitional fuel in the climate change transition on that. Nigeria has a huge amount of it, and it would be neglected. I mean, we talked about this back in 2020, 2022 with the energy issues between Europe and Russia, and then the invasion of the Ukraine in 2022 really created an opportunity for Nigeria to step up in LNG with the energy security issues in Europe, and that continues to be an area that Nigeria really needs to focus on.
Okay, really an interesting one. Before I let you go, one of the delegates at the conference is also talking about more collaboration between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Budget. He's saying that will help us have a well revenue-based budgeting and all of that. Do you think that handshake between, of course, now not just between the Ministry of Finance and Budget and even the central bank, do you think it's better than what we used to have?
Yes, I do. I mean, let me just go back and say the separation for me, when I learned about the separation and arriving in the country, I was a bit surprised. It struck me it must be done for, in a sense, to create another ministerial portfolio. So the fact that there's greater coordination, and particularly I think the relationship between the central bank and the Ministry of Finance is really excellent right now, and they're working very well together. And of course, there was always this talk about is fiscal policy and monetary policy coordinated. And I think Nigeria is in a much better place right now. And it really does help having such two really professional, economic, finance literate people in post who genuinely want to do the right thing for Nigeria. So I do think it's working much better.
Dr. Adunevin, I must thank you so much for your time. It's really good to see you on the show as always and have this chat with you. Thanks for your patience. Enjoy your weekend.
All right. Have a great Friday. Thank you, Tolo.
Yeah, you too.